Okay. Can you hear me?
I hear you and I see you.
Okay. Hello, I am Fernando Campayo Sánchez, and I'm going to explain this working paper entitled Competition Based on Rivals' Perceptions and the Influence on Product Survival, in which Francisco José Ruiz and Juan Nicolau Untitled are also authors. Product survival is traditionally predicted by the different factors. In this case, well, we focus on the relationship between the survival of the products and the competition with the products of other firms. The literature proposes that such competition decreases product life because it diminishes the sales and profits over time and forces the exit of the product from the market. This argument is based on the assumption that competition between products increases with the number of product models in the market segment. This number can be used as a measure of the degree of competition in terms of segment crowding. This measure is derived from the organizational ecology, which analyzes, among other things, the influence of density in organizational mortality. However, the number may not capture the asymmetric rivalry among the products of firms. We have collected the dyadic rivalry between the products of companies belonging to different strategic groups. This competition can be symmetrical or asymmetrical. Asymmetrical rivalry would occur, for example, if Audi and BMW simultaneously consider that their A4, for example, and 3 series models are rivals. On the contrary, asymmetric rivalry would occur when Audi considers the BMW model as a rival, but BMW doesn't consider the Audi car as such, or vice versa. The objective of this research is to analyze if product survival can be explained by the rivalry in terms of managerial attention between the products of companies that belong to different strategic groups. In this sense, we use a sample of products in the Spanish car market between 2008 and 2017. We use the approach of the industry history to identify the strategic groups. Normally, we have identified 3 strategic groups, namely generalist firms, low-cost companies, and producers with differentiated products. We use the concept of competitive comparison, which is a firm dyadic level concept that captures the comparison between 2 firms that offer comparable products in a given market. For example, Audi compares its sales to Mercedes-Benz and highlights every dimension where Audi is superior to Mercedes-Benz. Firms commonly make their own competitive comparisons public. In the case of car firms, each company publicizes comparisons with products of other firms on its website. Although similar to the concept of inter-firm competition at the firm dyadic level, a firm's competitive comparison doesn't capture the exact degree of competition between firms, but highlights whether or not a rival is chosen as a comparison target based on the focal firm's expected assessment. Or, in other words, competitive comparison only identifies those competitors that are deemed salient from firm's perspective, in that firms pay closer attention to the comparison targets than to other competitors. By taking a relative or comparative view of competitive perceptions, we propose a new approach to competitor analysis that involves putting a firm in the shoes of a rival in order to conceptualize competition on the basis of the rival's perceptions in relation to the focal firm's product. In doing so, we provide a theoretical and empirical refinement to competitor analysis research by showing how perceptions can be compared and analyzed to better comprehend competition at the level of product. Understanding a rival's perceptions is therefore critical if a focal firm is to know what to expect in the competitive arena and take the actions necessary to outperform the rival. Accordingly, and from the point of view of who are the rivals of the firm's products, we consider that if a firm's product is the main rival of another firm's product, then the former will be more competitive and successful and will survive longer than the latter. This mechanism is suggested by Engel when the managers of Ford and General Motors considered in the new minivan market that the small vans with rear-wheel drive were competitors of Chrysler's van with front-wheel drive. However, Chrysler didn't consider them competitors of their product. The consequence was that General Motors needed to reposition its small Astro van in other market categories, such as commercial vehicle. By contrast, Ford Star wasn't successful and didn't add much value to the firm as a minivan, thus it was substituted by Ford's Windstar. Most commonly are compared to Ford and General Motors truck with rear-wheel drive minivans. Chrysler's car with front-wheel drive minivan had a more compact design and lower overall height. The lower height made the Chrysler's minivan more garageable, which was one of the keys to its success. Additionally, Chrysler's use of a car-based front-wheel drive architecture allowed for more car-like handling, which was appreciated by the mothers who transported the children. Ford and General Motors minivan had better performance in light commercial and town applications, but the minivans had track like honey. That's fourth and general went appealing to families with children who comprise the largest number of minivan buyers. To sum up, when Ford and General Motors vans weren't considered as main rivals of the previous van, they weren't in an advantageous position and weren't able to survive in the minivan market. Therefore, we hypothesize that the focal firm's product survival increases when this product is perceived as the main rival of the product of another firm. Having said that, we have decided to analyze the influence that the strategic groups can have when it comes to conceptualizing rivalry. Second hypothesis will consider the generalist producer as a focal firm. In this way, we will analyze when product survival is most effective depending on the group to which the organization belongs, whose model competes with the focal firm's product. Following the model of judo economics of German and Salop, it seems that low-cost companies offer products in markets where generalist companies operate, especially segments which are more sensitive to price. This will necessarily lead to low-cost companies considering the products of generalist firm as the main rivals of their vehicles. In conclusion, the second hypothesis establishes that the commercial longevity at the level of product will increase to a greater extent when the cars of the generalist firms are considered as the main rival for models marketed by low-cost companies. Regarding the third hypothesis, the low-cost companies are considered as the focal firms. These organizations use a generic competitive strategy of cost leadership. Getting this type of positioning oftentimes entails obtaining a high market share. This says low-cost companies will focus on the products of other members of this strategic group with whom they compete to gain greater market share. Consequently, the product survival of these organizations will increase to a greater extent when they are considered as main rivals by the automobiles of other members in the same group. Finally, the fourth hypothesis considers that producers with differentiated products are the focal firms. These companies follow a generic competitive strategy of differentiation. Furthermore, and according to Johnson and Mayat, the companies with differentiated products will consider firms in the same strategic group as a benchmark. In this way, the product survival of these organizations will increase to a greater extent when they are considered as main rivals of other members in the same group. We will use a mixed effects co-regression model that explains the product survival through rivalry. This proportional Hazard model is specified in matrix form as shown on the slide. The fundamental variable in the survival analysis is duration, which is defined by a positive variable t that measures time until the occurrence of a certain event. In the present study, this variable denotes the product exit of the market. Thus, the variable captures the time in which a product model survives in the market until moment t. There are different functions that we can use to model survival. We have opted for the hazard function because it's often used to model the time until the exit of the product model, and the results can be interpreted easily. This variable specifies the probability that a product exits the market at t, given that it has not exited until then. And the matrix equation, we define the co-regression model, we can see that it's based on a generalization of the exponential distribution. First of all, we have the baseline hazard function. This function, which includes the constant term, represents the hazard that the product exit occurs simply with the passage of time. It's an arbitrary hazard function which is non-specified and non-negative over time. In turn, x represents the covariable matrix for the fixed effects, and beta, the vector of coefficient. The independent variables capture the rivalry between products of companies belonging to different strategic groups through multiple dummy variables. On the other hand, we include variables related to the segments in order to control heterogeneous influence of the markets, as well as the firm size, which is measured by a modeling number of new vehicles registrations. Lastly, Z is the variable matrix for the random effects, and U, a vector of coefficients which follow a Gaussian distribution. We establish nested random effects at the level of brand and product. The reason why we have included them is the presence of an observed heterogeneity. Furthermore, this model is appropriate when we have hierarchical data and different observations in each period. Finally, it's very flexible due to its ability to add sensor-dependent variables at time-dependent covariates. Regarding the results, these two graphs show the increase in the number of vehicles sold in the Spanish car market due to the greater number of new product launches in comparison to the product exits from the market. On the other hand, the second graph shows that the producers with differentiated products and the low-cost firms have been gaining ground to generalist companies in terms of market share. Conclusion, there is a great competition in the Spanish car market due to the greater product proliferation. This graph represents the cumulative probability that the product exit occur after the moment T. The average survival of the analyzed vehicle is approximately 80 months. Therefore, half of the cars exit the market at 6 years and 8 months. This function becomes relatively flat after 12 years and 6 months. On the slide, the descriptive statistic table is shown. If we focus on rivalry, we have different comparative variables. Theory refers to generalist companies, ED to producers with differentiated products, and LC to low-cost firms. Thus, RIP-TG, for example, is measured by a dummy variable in which one indicates that focal firm belongs to the group of generalist producers, and its model is cited as the main rival by the manager of another firm of the group of generalist producers. This table shows two means effects co-regression model. A smaller value of the exponential of coefficient implies that survival is greater. In this sense, we observe in the first model that survival increases when product is cited by a product of another firm. Regarding the second model, we have analyzed multiple comparative variables according to different statistic groups, which allows us to support the relationships assumed in the hypothesis. However, and given that it's a working paper, it will be necessary to add more control variables to model, as well as to analyze other possible relationships in the future. Thank you very much. We greatly appreciate your attention.
Yeah, dear Fernando, thank you very much. This was just on time.